Every day it's more news items. What if we turned off the machine? Would that stop the news? Well, let's see. Let's just see what some of them are. When the dents comment on the obvious, it ceases to be quite so obvious. One man said to a friend as he was pointing to his head, if you're not exactly what you're sure you're doing up there, it could be that you're starting to think for yourself. The dominant favor stability and order, while those out of power sing the praises of the truth. Man invented the concept of God so that there'd be apparently someone else besides him that didn't like what he was doing. Well, that's sermon time, isn't it? Long before anyone ever even dreams of any sort of intellectual independence, they are already wired to the collective neural network of man. And once you see this, once you accept this, once you understand that this is the natural order of things, there is only one question left of any reason. What now? If you can truly picture man being in need of some kind of instruction concerning how to be a man, that is, man the creature, then even if you mislaid your ID card and your passport, don't worry, there's no doubt. No one will mistake you for anything else other than a man. I'll go back and straighten that one out if you... Well, some of these stringers that send in this stuff, they get... I think, well, you know how people in the press are. I think some of them. Should it not give one a clue, some sort of hint, the fact that all the lessons regarding the ordinary things of life are all based on repetition? The root cause of all human problems is roots. Life only expects one thing of man, which is why men must imagine that it expects so much more. I would say, no one asks, that this is a cornucopia, a plethora of usable news items. Assuming that we don't have any ordinary business type people interested in profit and fame and fortune here, or then, of course, these are of absolutely no value, I don't guess. How about, since we've already had some news items in the last month regarding what it is that life amongst itself, amongst the collective, that people seem to be teaching one another, all forms of instruction. Does it not strike anyone as being curious, in the sense of it being interesting, that, and think about it now, it's not an attack on education, but think, everything from your mother, from preschool, from your parents trying to get you to stop doing the nasty thing in the floor, all the way from that to studying for your master's degree at a high-class, fancy university kind of place. What is all forms of instruction based on? No one questions it. What's it based on? Repetition. Now, I don't mean it's some fault of them, but that's the way they teach it. And if you go off on your own and you think, well, I'll go off and cram for a test and study on my own, I'm not a fool. What do? You read the same thing over and over and over, and you keep reminding yourself. All right, 6 times 9 is 54, not 45. 54. 6 times 9 is 54. 6 times 9 is 54. Shakespeare died in 1616, not 1666. 1616. 1654? No, it's 6 times 9. 1616. I assume I made the point. People just never think about it. It is accepted. That's the way it works. That's the only way it works, at the ordinary level. If you're going to learn something, repetition. They can change the name a little bit, but everyone would agree. It's repetition. They would say, well, how else? What do you expect? But that doesn't give anybody any sort of hint. Now, if you were ordinary, it wouldn't give you any kind of hint because you might understand rhetorically the words I just used and go, well, the sentence made a little sense, but what the hell's the point? Because they wouldn't see it. The thing is, everything that's taught by repetition, can I just put in some ellipses? You want to fill in the blank? That if everything that's ordinarily taught is on the basis of repetition, then that would or could lead a man to begin to think that everything that humans know is based on or is tied to or is, in fact, blank. Well, Wink, can I have another 10 seconds to think about it? Sure, go ahead. Think about it. And it's not just, if you look at it this way, it is not just in the world of strict, relatively speaking, academia. People do it in areas that would appear to be more social. Morality. People go week after week to church of some form to hear somebody tell them what? The same damn thing over and over and over. Other than the fact that none of this, as you know, is a sermon, that nothing is wrong, you almost have to push it with yourself to make it extreme sometimes or a little dramatic because it is so subtle, it is so past how life is wired up that you can think about it and then you understand what you're thinking about. That even you, I don't have to keep doing the part of me saying, well, an ordinary man could hear this and go, well, the sentence sort of made grammatical sense. But what's the point? And you can almost do it yourself. But tied to, if I may, this is another news item down here. That this one is really, how about viscid, for those of you with a Velcro mind. If you truly believe, if you picture and you believe that man is in some sort of need of instructions regarding how to be a man, and then it goes on blank, 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 like if you do, then, I got some real estate I'd like to sell you and near the Lake Okeechobee. But think, that is what it is true in education, but that is a little more, now the situation is somewhat reversed from the previous example because now it is more in the area specifically, or more directly involved with that which appears to be social education. Again, the primary institutional source of this would apparently be religion, but it's also in the uncodified sense of morality of any people anywhere. But take the idea of religions of all sorts. It's sort of the focal, institutional, external version of morality and sense of propriety and the collective paradigm of civilization at any particular time, that you have a man all dressed up, in fancy clothes, or a woman, in a fancy building, and it appears to be, may I say, deadly, deadly serious. And what are they talking about? Now, if you get past all the other trappings and the misdirection, which they don't mean to, but what are they telling you? And they would even admit this if you put it to them. They're telling you how to be a human. Properly. How to properly, they'd want to throw that in, but I can live with that. But still, as opposed to what? And of course they would say an improper human or an immoral human or an unchristian human, all right. But still notice, almost any time you go in, if you're not being directly entertained, unless up on the stage is somebody good, they have dug up Mozart or Wilson Pickett's out of jail. Unless it's just direct entertainment, anytime you go and you're apparently dancing between an audience and a stage, what's going on is some sort of apparent information. Now it can apparently be information as to something that might have a financial payoff, but you're almost, if you can say it, you're almost always involved with a dance that somebody is standing up on a stage, in a podium, somebody that apparently is in the dominant position for some period of time, that you sit there and put up with it. And if they're not singing and dancing, maybe juggling, then they are almost, without exception, offering some kind of serious instruction regarding how to be a person, how to go about being a human. Well, now one more time, you and priests and rabbis could even miss it and go, well, yeah, but think about this. You show up, one day you're minding your own business, and the next thing you know, you're born and you're a human and you're here. And then almost the next thing you know is somebody, and they're beating a drum or there's some kind of commotion going on, and you go in a place and it's a man standing up on a higher level, up on a stage, up in a pulpit somewhere, and everyone's looking very serious, and you know, stop for a second to hear what's going on. And what's going on? It's another human. So that's the first thing. You've already forgotten that. It's another person, which is, to help you forget, is one reason that those kind of people, as we've already had news items, they tend to dress up real funny. Except you already forgotten that. You just accept, you know, serious people have to dress funny. But here it is, you go in and there's another human being. And he's probably waving a book of some kind. And he's saying, we have got to apply ourselves, we have got to study. And you think, well, what? And it turns out, we've got to study how to be a human. And you say, well, wait a minute. I suddenly seem to have gotten drafted. You know, I was somebody's, I don't know whether I was first round or 110th round draft choice, but somebody drafted me into this game and I'm here. Okay. And now you're saying that I didn't come with some kind of built-in instructions, that another human is going to tell me how I should act to be a human. But life in its devilish intrigues has an answer for that. The person would go, no, it's not me telling you. Where's my Bible? They wave, nah, it's the gods. With ordinary people, I guess that flies. They don't burn down, you know, on large scales, on a constant schedule. They don't burn down churches and synagogues. So it seems to fly. Do you think, oh, so it's not him. It's not just that guy dressed up, that man up there in a dress. We won't go into that. It is kind of interesting. Morality instructions from the drag queen. Well, you know, maybe fashion hints, but moral instruction? Well, at any rate. Well, the only reason I'm playing around with all the humor and etc. is literally, surely some of you see it, it is so slick. Because if you did this very crudely, which is about the only way you can start, ordinary people just generally would dismiss it as being some sort of cheap cynicism or that you're attacking religion. It is almost impossible to get a sense of the very non-hostile, just absolutely jaw-breaking humor in the fact that people all over the world, including you, have done it sitting there seriously contemplating, not just actually in church, you can see it on TV or in a book. And you just never think about it. And what it's telling you is the necessary instructions to be a human. And you look around, if you had any ability to think non-belligerently, you look around and you think, Jesus, I am just as good and just as terrible as every cheap son of a bitch on this planet. I mean, just because I may be too frightened to act in certain ways, I am as sleazy, I am as uncouth, I am as despicable as anybody I have ever even seen in a cheap movie. But I'm also as intelligent as anybody I've ever gotten all dressed up and paid money and went to hear them say, here's what you should do. And hell, all it was a bunch of cliques. I knew all that. So I'm as good, I'm as terrible, and this is not to prove it. I'm just trying to get you to see how slick, how well oiled this machinery is, that you can't get the gist of, how can I believe that I need instructions on how to be here? Because everything in life is arranged for the answer to be, well, the reason is because you don't do right. And there's another news item here, because that will get ordinary people. All you got to do is take an ordinary person, if they're just fairly sane and if they're in a sober condition, and just jump out of an alleyway and grab a person and go, oh, and almost anybody in the world will look ashamed. You don't have to say look ashamed. They just look ashamed. Because they're not sure what you know. That's like the old joke, you know. The guy was going to run for a public office. And he suddenly got an anonymous telegram that says, don't you enter this race because I know all and I'll tell it. And the guy dropped out. You know? It wasn't even signed. He didn't say anything else. That's the nature of life. You just say, oh, I know about you. And people go, I don't know what it is. They're the Adam. And here was that men came up with the concept of the gods so that they could believe that there was somebody else that apparently didn't like what they do as much as they do. Which is, that's worse than backwards to ordinary thinking. That's backwards. That's turned inside out. It's like turning your sock inside out and then in some way turn it into like a 4D Mobius strip to push it into another dimension. Because ordinary people go, no, 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 no. The only reason we feel bad is because the God said we'd feel bad. That they didn't like what we're doing. This is closer to the truth, I must tell you. That man came up with the concept of the God so that they'd feel like. That's part of what all Vedi Mikams and holy books are in some apparent external sense of instructions and directions, is so that it's not just men, because if men were stuck, this couldn't happen. But if it could happen, they couldn't stand it if they were suddenly struck. If I could make all humans realize, you disapprove of what you do. Yeah? And there's no reason for it. You don't know why. Well, okay. But that would be kind of hard to live with. Yeah? So, if you come up with the idea that there's some kind of force outside that somebody else saying, oh, that may not cure it, yeah, but you feel a little bit better. I mean, it almost makes sense compared to the first version. That is that, well, you were born, you just end up here, right? And you feel guilty about being here. Yeah. May I suggest that is almost, many people find life unbearable, but that is almost unbearable even for the middle class. But rather than that, rather than leaving it at that, if you put it on the basis that, wait a minute, it's like somebody jumps out of an alley. Except in this case, it's supernatural people that you can't get your hands on. But it's the same story I just did. It's like somebody jumps out of an alley at you and goes, oh. That's all they got to do, and you immediately look ashamed and guilty. But if it was, people can't, it would not work. This thing, the machinery would not run. People would not put up with it. They just go nuts based on how things are now. Life could change it, but based on how things are now. So there has to apparently be an extrinsic basis. You cannot be guilty indigenously. Which, of course, is what these news items and yours truly is most strongly suggesting. So, built in with that is, well, you don't feel right, do you? No. And, of course, there's an outside reason. Well, there's got to be. So what you need is instructions how to straighten your life out. And some of the instructions, be a Christian, be a Jew, be a Buddhist, be a Republican, be a humanitarian, be decent, be something, but you know you're not right. Well, that's true. Back to where we're trying to tie some of the news items in, if you notice then, if there was such a thing as necessary, reasonable, useful instruction that was so not, and according to religion, and not just religion because people put up with it too, it's a two-way dance, of course, it's not their fault, that would seem to be much more important than learning your multiplication tables, right? And everybody goes, yeah. So it's bad enough, if you caught the gist of where we opened with the first news item, that there is something a little suspect that all things in life are taught on the basis of repetition. Ordinary people put up with it when you point out the example like multiplication tables, and they think, well, so what? How about everything? Dates, history, yeah. So, the questions, you're standing for your boards today, you're taking the bar exam, you're taking, your boards at the hospital, you're taking, what do you have to do? Well, I've got to memorize all this stuff. Over and over and over, they're going to ask questions. And nobody finds it curious. But how about on the basis? That might seem not absolutely required. That might seem escapable in life. You could grow up and not even finish grammar school. You could grow up and not actually have to ever take any sort of test like that. You could end up, I guess, laying brick without knowing the multiplication tables. And so people say, so it doesn't hold. But how about this? Beyond that, if there's anything super important, if there's anything more important than knowing the date of Shakespeare's death, or what 5 times 9 is, or 6 times 9 is. If there's anything more important than that, it would be what? Areas that are uniquely human. Areas of morality. How you should treat your fellow man. How much interest is reasonable to charge somebody on a loan. So you think, all right, if there is real important information like from the guides, then come on. It's got to have some sort of force to it. There's got to be some sort of hegemony to that kind of information so that you don't have to say, all right, everybody repeat after me, I shall not steal. I shall not steal. And you do that for 40 years. Did you miss it? If it was of any supreme importance, if being moral, if knowing what, as they put it, the guides want you to do, if that is, which they would agree, is more important than knowing your multiplication tables, and if your multiplication tables are basically taught and acceptably so on the basis of repetition, then when you gain important information like what the guides want, give yourself a break. You should hear it. They say, all right, the guides say to you people, don't steal. And the priest or whoever doing it say, you understand the words don't steal. Don't means do not, yeah. And steal means take something that you didn't buy or grow or make, yes. Don't steal. And people go, got it, got it. Have they got it? No, they come back next week like to be retuned again, like, well. And he looks, and all the people go, I told you not to, well, God told you not to steal. Yeah. Well, some of you seem to have had a certain kind of knowing laughter when I was talking about the first one, about the things that you learn in life. The ordinary things are all they're all taught on the basis of repetition, and whether it be sociology, whether it be chemistry, whether it be mathematics, whether it be music, whether it be art appreciation, it's all taught in the ordinary world on the basis of repetition. And should that not give a hint, not to the instruction, but what seems to be the outcome? Where is it going? If it's taught on the basis of repetition, then what is it that we're learning? What adjective about whatever it is that we're studying is never brought up? Well, some of you kind of gave a knowing chuckle, and I don't hear the same kind of knowing chuckle now when it gets into what seems to be or should be very important, relatively speaking, matters. How to be a human. If humans are actually lacking that kind of built-in information, and that they do need, that they do not come with ipse dixit instructions, that somebody must tell them how to be a human. All right, anything that important, because you can get by without the multiplication tables and you could get by without knowing Rembrandt from clay. But you can't get by without knowing how to be a human, can you? So when you hear it, why do you have to hear it a second time? If it's that important, if you are so severely lacking in being a human, what can be more important than that? And so if for whatever fluke, if for whatever reason, that man is not born absolutely knowing how to be a human in the proper way, then if the instructions are available, which everyone says they are, then why would they ever have to be repeated? I mean, something that important. We're not talking about, whether you can recognize Baroque music from early Renaissance or late Renaissance music. We're talking about something important, how to be alive, how to be a human. And so if you're not born knowing how, which in the collective sense no one is, that's part of what holds everything together. Let's all band together, because do you know what you're doing? No, I don't know. Of course, they call it other things, but that's what that grand dance is all about. It's only civilized people. It's only those that think this whole thing's going to wreck and I'm not going down alone. That's the people that are civilized. That's the people who are sociable. That's decent people. But if it was that important, the one time that you heard the information, that would be it. You would go to a church, temple, a Buddhist place, whatever they are. You'd go somewhere and you'd go there one time. It's not even that funny, by the way. It's funnier. Well, if you ever see the, and of course, sans any hostility or rancor, non-vitriolic, but just to see how slick this whole thing is, that they're people, serious people, because you know that we're not making fun of priests or anybody. But there's a group of people, and it can be in a non-religious context, that's just the easiest to always describe, and there are serious people, your parents, your relatives, people you work for, people you work with, and there they sit, and there's a person standing there, and get past the religion, etc., but they're telling you things like how important it is, and they'll bring out different, they'll quote from their holy book, the Bible, the Old Testament, Buddha. They'll bring out psychologists trying to reinforce important information such as, you shouldn't steal from people. If you can forget all morality and etc., which again is extremely difficult to do at the ordinary level, but I'll assume some of you can follow what I'm talking about. It's got nothing to do with morality. It would simply be the most efficient way to live. From a more expanded view, if somebody has to be told, don't steal. May I try one more time? Can you hear this? And anyway, you got to get to almost a new part of the brain and divorce any sense of morality, that stealing is immoral. Forget all, if you can get past that, because that simply represents something. It represents a kind of less efficient transfer of energy. The funnier part I was trying to get you to see, the slicker part is, anybody that had any potential to be a human wouldn't have to tell somebody to tell them how to live efficiently. Such as, and that's what morality is all about in a crude level, is to say not to steal. If you ever hear that, you realize, well, you know, we're all dumber, we're all denser than I even ever imagined, because I never realized that's not even that's not even fit instructions for a 2-year-old, which of course it is, but it's not. If there was any potential that men could do what they dream they can do, well, if you ever see it, you're going to get a real big smile. That there are people, and it's been going on, it still goes on, it increases, and they're telling people what it amounts to is this on a more expanded level. How about this? Literally. Of course, it's not literally. To tell people not to steal, to tell people, don't step on your neighbor's foot. To tell them that at a more expanded level is the same thing as telling a human, breathe. Keep breathing. Go. It's that slick. Well, just between us, you can look at it another way, since everybody still likes to suffer a little bit every now and then. There's no way to look at it. Once you do see it, if I don't inspire you by saying you'll really get a good smile, then those of you that still like to be picked on and suffer, you'll feel dumber than you ever, no matter how bad you've ever felt before, no matter what a dumbass you think you can be, it's nothing. To realize that we all stand around at that level, and we let inside the collective intelligence of man that life is doing it. It's telling people, breathe, live, eat, then don't eat, then eat some more, then don't eat, then inhale and exhale. Let me write this. No, can I write this? Can I take notes? Of course, there is a reason for all of this. It makes men do that, which is not necessary if we look at man as being just a physical creature that could talk. If it were not for that, back to the easiest example, why in the hell would anybody get up and go to work? I mean serious work, because nowadays you get up and go down and pick up food stamps. Go down and pick up cans along the road and you get enough to eat. But why would you actually get up and try to get somewhere in life? Be somebody. Well, nobody wants to be somebody except people. Nobody else wants to be anybody. It's obvious we don't really have to go into the world of fables, but you don't see dogs and any other animals fighting for position. Wait a minute, sir. They fight for relative hierarchies of powers within the pack. Well, I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up. Because there's quite a bit of difference between that, if I may say, now that you've started. There's quite a bit of difference between that and people being decent humans and moral citizens. There is. I ask you not to bring that up. Nobody wants to be anybody except somebody who thinks that they are less than they should be to start with. Why get up if you're not going to improve yourself? Why get up if you don't think you should improve yourself? Why get up unless you think, well, I have still not completed my full function. I have not developed into a full-fledged human. And of course, who was going to start taking a collection every time that somebody said, of course? No. Just a penny. Just a penny. Of course, I'll take a nickel if you will. If a person was a person, if a person understood, hey, I came with instructions, if a person found any operation of validity in what I've said for the last 20 minutes, do you expect that you would see them down at the local place of worship, at a political rally, at a brokerage house, at a march of any kind in the street where you're waving banners and on a mission? Can you imagine them at a high-class hair salon as opposed to maybe having a shade tree mechanic trim their hair with a blowtorch? In other words, all of the things that make people civilized and sane collectively, if you did not believe that you were in dire need, if you would not accept that which is already wired into the collective intelligence, that you were in need of further instructions as to how to friggin' die. I know it seems like live, but it's just so that you'll live long enough to die. And I need instructions for this? I need to go pay somebody to tell me, breathe. And of course the way they put it, and it's already the two-way dance, is as soon as they say, it's a good thing you people got here because I've got something to tell you. You don't even have to tell what it is. Once I say breathe, you laugh like, well, how ridiculous. But it's not. Because as soon as they say, we have something important to tell you, everybody goes. And after that, they can say anything. We know that you've been stealing again. We know that you have not breathed every time you should. It is almost, I assume everyone's seen a dog that, in the country they used to call it, that had been cowed. A dog that perchance had been mistreated by humans to the point that all you had to do, a human look at him, and the dog would just put his tail down and wander off. Of course, animals do it to each other. It's not just men. But he immediately is guilty. He immediately, and all guilt is submission. Humans don't look at it that way. Of course, the real fanatics would say, well, yeah, it is submission. It's submission to the will of God. Thank you, Jesus. First part of the sentence was right. It's submission. But they won't say, yeah, but submission too, and they got to look for an extrinsic source. It's submission to the collective intelligence of man. Would you explain that? Yes, everyone's born feeling incomplete. Yes. And then they translate it into other words like guilty. Yes, that's correct. That's proper. Good. You wait here and I'll come back and talk to you later. If I'm not back in 40 years, start without me. Well, I don't know how much more, if any, I could say, if you ever see it, because I can't resist, of course. Other than the fact we seem to have to talk about it in words like that, it has nothing to do with religion, has nothing to do with other people, has nothing to do with stupidity. It has to do with the fact that man is incomplete because of this, thanks to this. And on that basis, and it's not wired in individually for anyone to know what they should be doing. And so everyone turns around, what should we be doing? Do you know what you're doing? And everybody's a little vague. And if they're not a little vague, ordinary people, then they're suspect. Because if it's somebody that says, yes, I know exactly, then the ordinary people have a name for that, fanaticism. And the ordinary, normally, under most conditions, will avoid the person. that is, you're already wandering around in life. And let's assume that you're just fairly ordinary, and you go, does anybody know exactly what they're doing? Your mother and father, they don't know? Of course, I know they all, because of the collective way things are stabilized and ordered, they would say, well, I don't know personally, but go talk to the rabbi, go talk to our priest, go talk to somebody. So they infer that there is the knowledge of how to be a better person, but in your mother and father, let's assume they're as sane as you are, and they would say, well, I don't really know, and that's one of the reasons we have. And they would normally refer to institutions, very likely religion, but that's why we have society, that's why we have education, that's why we have a sense of community, morals, and standards, and that's why we have religion, the words of the God. So everyone, in that sense, every sane person, when they look around and say, well, does anybody know exactly what we should be doing in life? Then all other sane people say, well, not really. Now forget for a second that they attribute it, like go down and talk to somebody or read the Bible. They just admit, well, no, I don't really know. Contrary, if somebody says, yes, I heard that, somebody wanted to know what, hey, I'll tell you what to know, then you immediately expect the guy to get up on a balcony and put on a funny shirt or hat and get a marching band, and you're on the verge of a new form of fascism, which works sometimes. But ordinary sane people in their individual life, as soon as you meet somebody that says, well, you came to the right place because the rest of you people do not know, I know. And I'm not talking about I have some Bible here. I know personally. I bypassed all that. The gods speak to me personally. All the sane people go, well, we'll come back later. Tell me the next time you're having a meeting, everybody will back out the door. So you understand, the sane part, the stable part of life is for everyone to admit that they do not know what to do. And no one finds that of interest. Because if they knew what to do, they wouldn't do anything. They'd eat, screw, sleep, hang around, spit. Maybe periodically just check the listings to see if indeed Wilson is out of jail. Maybe going to show up in town. But other than that, they wouldn't do anything. It is so directly greasy and obliquely complex to realize that people live on the basis, whether they apparently be religious overtly or not, but they live on the basis, the sane, the ordinary of life, on the basis that they are not operating fully as a human and do not find it at all interesting. Forget anything with the great modifiers and adjectives like extremely interesting. They don't even find it interesting. Of course, there's one way to look at it. They're too busy feeling bad about it to find it interesting. Which is still part of it, because then you're part of the belligerency. You're a partisan. You're the type that life does jump out under different guises out of an alleyway and go, oh. What's to go oh about? I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen, you already know about. You're going to die. You're going to die and lay down and stink, and nobody wants to be around you. They'll quit talking about you. Nobody will invite you out anymore. No, even if Wilson Pickett is in town, they're not going to buy you a ticket. It's all over. So there's the worst. And you also, people do know that nobody else knows what's going on, the sane people, because they've asked. They initially asked all of you in various ways, and very likely point blank. Back when you were so young you don't remember it and it didn't seem to be relevant to those involved, but to ask your parents and other people, do you know what's going on here? What the hell are we doing here? And the other sane people admit they don't know. But you quickly, all of that get distracted. Because if things were arranged in a somewhat more complex manner to you at an early age, then now you are 2 years old asking your parents, which by all intents and purposes should be the original paradigms for gods and great forces, and you finally get around to saying, what's going on here? And your father or mother looks you dead in the eye and say, I'm your best friend, I'm your family, and I'm going to tell you the truth, I do not know. But, and there's the segue. and now you're whatever you are. Let's say you're 40 years old. For 38 years, you have bought that Segway. They said, I don't know. And just about the time, I'll go ahead and make it up, about the time that if there was a potentially independent thinker, a 2-year-old, and a parent says, now I'm going to tell you the truth. As your best friend, as your genetic guardian, I'm going to tell you the truth. I do not know, but you would still be there in some sense. They said, I don't know, but. And you went, yeah. It's like saying, well, you've got a fatal disease, but. Well, they cancel. Wilson Pickett's not here, but Little Richard's going to show up. I don't know what's going on, son or daughter, but. Yes. And then they point. Except the pointing, where they point. You go there and you seek that out, and what is it? Repetition. And if you ever see it, it's not that the repetition is wrong, but you would also say, wait a minute, I want to know what's going on, and no one will tell me what's going on, and even my parents said they didn't know, but they told me, here's what got us through, here's who does know. So you go there, and it's normally been religious sources, institutions. You go there, they don't know what's going on, except they've got this to tell you. You are not operating as a human should.
No.
Okay. All right. So I guess this is going to lead right to the secret about why we're here. That's probably it. And the priest or I might go, good question, my boy. All right. Now listen to me. Now here's what I want you to do. Okay. I want you to, and then they start into some kind of rituals. You understand? It's like the world's first version of Hocus Pocus. It's like the world's greatest. It's the origins of legerdemain, of misdirection. Those of you that didn't major in the black arts. It's like the magician saying, all right, now notice there's nothing up my sleeves and all that. And they say, now, watch this. And he does this. And then he's picking whatever it is, he's going to produce a coin or something. And he's saying, all right, now, I want you to see, nothing here. Shows both. And you think, yeah. That's like showing both sides of the brain, both brains. It's saying, all right, it could be this, it could be that. We don't know yet. And you go, all right. And then the magician says, all right, now watch. Now I want you to watch. Now look. Now, are you looking? Now look right there. He'll even point to his own damn hand, which is what religion does. That's all forms of self-reference. The magician points to his own right hand like, watch this. And what do? Being the all-star brain you are, you go. And he goes, watch. And he'll do a little bit of this, which is a form of putting on a dress, wearing a funny hat, and waving candles, or, chanting and doing. It's the same thing, and it's self-reference. The religion, the institution, the collective intelligence of man points to itself. Watch this. And what they're saying, in essence, watch this great act. And what they're really saying is, watch where we point, because we don't know what we're doing either. So look over here. And so the magician, he says, now watch. Are you watching? And you go, yeah. And you go, all right, now watch. And then we do some of it. And you say, all right, now look. And then you sit right there, and he'll reach in his down pocket right in front of you, and he'll get the quarter or wherever it is. And it's all right, now you see. And then he'll go, and suddenly he puts it in the other hand, and there's the damn quarter. And you think, my God. That is the kind of misdirection about, I'd like to know what's going on here. Your parents and everyone else, all sane people say, we don't know. But go over here and look. And you go over there. And you say, I don't know what's going on. They say, you came to the right place. And then if you try to ask the direct question, they'll say, wait a minute. And it's like, all right, watch this, watch this, watch this. And then they start having you do something else. And the question has never been answered. Except now you assume that what we're doing now is some form of answer. It's repetition. I mean, the answer's got to be for, you forgot that there was a question. Well, I know the ordinary think that the gods invented man, but this news item, like I said, it's not just the inverse, but it's sort of a sideways, more detailed telling of what's involved, the fact that man came up with the concept of the gods. That is something external to them, to your brain. That is that you want to believe, you've got to believe if you're ordinary, that there is somebody hiding in that alleyway. And that every time you feel bad, every time you feel guilty, every time you feel, and it's not some cultural, it's not some more moral, it's not some acquired. syndrome of sin and guilt. It is built in to the fact that the nervous system is not through yet, and it's asking itself and everybody else, what's the next step up the ladder? And hell, it doesn't know. And so it keeps looking around. What is it? I don't know how else to describe it reasonably. But every time that you feel less than human, anytime you feel bad, and it is not, if it could be identified, strictly physical, a cut finger, a sore in the ear, a broken leg, then every other time you will assume, whether you put the words on it or not, that there is, if he didn't jump out of the alley, he's there. That there is some extrinsic cause for you feeling this way. There has to be. And if you see that without any qualitative idea toward any of human institutions or anybody out there, it's not religion's fault or any institution's fault, you realize it is built into the genetic makeup and pattern of men, and it is so frustrating, it would be almost a matter of neural gridlock if you were left there. You have to. Unless you can, any of you, if you come up with a new one, tell me and I'll submit it to life. I'm sure it will be real pleased. But at any rate, if you can think up a more efficient way, that if you feel that incomplete, rather than going crazy, other than becoming just immobile over it, which is what it would do in essence, which is one form of, or one way in which people apparently become insane, culturally inoperative, socially unacceptable. I assume some of you know that there are actually people that seem to be physically healthy that turn out to be catatonic in sanatoriums and hospitals, and they have to actually pick them up in bed in the morning, go sit them over there and feed them. And people just sit. It's like, I quit playing, period. That would be almost what would happen even to ordinary people if they did not feel that there is some external cause. Adam and Eve ran amok. Or humans have never operated exactly right. Well, how do you know that, sir? Well, the Bible tells me so. My priest tells me so. Everybody knows that's so. And of course, they can turn to you and say, why? Are you Mr. Perfect? And of course, you don't admit you are. I mean, real pretentious. There is no answer to it. Are you perfect? Of course, there is an answer to it, but nobody wants to hear it because you say, by what standard? And of course, then they're normally down to having to make some philosophical grab at the truth or to fall back upon deeper theological approaches, such as they'd have to say, well, hey, screw you, something like that. What I was trying to point out was it is if you can see it, it is extremely efficient. And not just me saying it, it's when I was challenging you to think up, just on the basis of how things are now, think up another way to do this. Think up what else life could do. Other than the fact that you feel incomplete, that something is wrong, and rather than going into a kind of intellectual catatonia, which is just, I was wondering about you Irish people, whether you found that, or Scottish people. Never mind. Rather than do that, as long as you feel like, well, I am incomplete, something is wrong, well, how do you know that? There has to be somewhere to point. And of course, it's good, it's nice and efficient if there's somewhere to point. It's superior to you. How else is it going to work? Well, I don't feel good. I don't feel like I'm living a proper life. Well, why do you feel this way? Well, I was visited by several of the shop stewards from the Carpenters Union, and they said that the life I was living was not going to cut it. I'm using members of the Builders Union, see, in kind of a sense that they might be less of a social and intellectual than, let us say it was a physics professor that did this. You understand? In other words, it wouldn't work if some drunk in the alley, you're walking by, as bad as you may be feeling, you just got through, getting out of bed with somebody that's not your husband or wife, or you just got through drinking, or just got through stealing money somewhere, and you're walking along the street, and you're always feeling guilty, or every alley you pass, you're afraid the guides or somebody going to jump out and go, and you pass, and there's a guy laying in the gutter, and with one foot down in the grate, and a bottle of Mad Dog, and he looks up at you and says, "Boy, you look like a sorry son of a bitch to me." Is that going to put you into some form of moral gridlock? Well, plus don't look at it as being, well, at least that would be a boon for the day, because that wouldn't work if that's all. If that was the only source of apparent guilt, ridicule, censure for man. It has to be that it's apparently that your reproach is coming from higher sources. In times past, when people, before they could afford their own gods, they had the kings. Or if you were a serf, you had the manor of the Lord, or the Lord of the manor. You had somebody come along and look at you and say, "You churl, you crude potato head," and you go, "Yeah." So, the king, your betters in life, peers, royalty, somebody. But the gods are the ultimate, because you can't get your hands on them, you can't reason with them, you can't say, "Wait a minute, I do feel terrible, but hell, I've been feeling terrible now for 30 or 40 years. I keep going, I light those candles, and I don't eat fish on Friday, and I don't drink milk on Tuesday, and I stone my head. And I keep reading this book over and over, and I still feel bad." See, if it was the king, if it was the duke, if it was the guy on whose land, if it was your liege lord, you can at least finally go to him and say, "Give me a break. Now, I've been working here on this damn farm. You've been taking half of what I grow for the last 30 years. Would you give me the last 5 years? I'm dying." It turns out, the smithy told me, he checked me, and there's no doubt I have got an advanced case of Gruber's syndrome. And I'll be dead before the year's out. Let me keep all the potatoes. You go try to petition the king, like, quit sending me out these messages that I'm no good. You've told me I'm no good for 30 years. I agree, but give me a break. See, the concept of gods, you can't get your hands on them. And so then it seems to be acceptable that you feel bad, because you can't get to them. You can't go petition them. I'll admit, the Catholic Church at one time had a pretty good shot at that, trying to buy, what do they call them? Little grants, contribute so much to the church, and they give you 2 years of no guilt, Of course, you see it didn't survive. I mean, it sounds nice, like we'll do it, but even humans, because paying money, sacrificing, still won't take this away. Not as long as you're alive and sane. And so, even that, it sounded good at first, like, all right, there's only a few of you parishioners, the select ones, that everybody else is going to have to suffer, and everybody else, they can't drink, and they can't screw their neighbor's wife, and they can't steal from their neighbor. But now you pay us here, because we're in direct contact with the gods. You pay us 10,000 shekels, and for 2 years, you can do anything the hell you want to, and God won't care. And that sounds great, doesn't it? I mean, to ordinary. But notice, that was very short-lived, because people actually paid it. Went, "Yeah, God." But they did it, and they kept having to go back and check with the priest and say, "Well, now you're sure that God don't care that I'm screwing my neighbor's wife, or my neighbor's oxen, or coveting my neighbor," however it works. And the priest says, "Nah, you paid the money. Yeah, we got your name. Nah, God don't care." And people go, and they think, "Well, how come I don't feel any better?" So even apparently making direct sacrifice, and the people who apparently were in charge of making you feel bad anyway, even if they say, "Hey, you don't have to feel bad for 2 years," it still doesn't work, because the point is, if you're sane and ordinary, nothing works. The only thing that works, the only thing that takes this away at the ordinary level, is the big D. Is Gruber? Come get me. The only other possibility, of course, is to move somewhere in your brain that none of this is pertinent anymore. It's to start all over. It's to civilize yourself. It's to come up with a whole new concept, not of God's, and not of feeling guilty. It's to go somewhere to where you can turn back and look and say, well, that's what was going on. You know, what else is new? What else is there to say? What, am I going to go back and step in it again? I don't even want to think about that. I don't mean me personally. I don't want to think about it on your behalf. Boy, I sure do miss all that crap all over my shoes and my brain. Maybe I'll just go back and jump in it one more time. Plus, it makes me feel good. I always imagine it's my mother or God hollering, "Are you out there jumping in that shit again? Are you jumping in the mud with your good clothes on?" Well, I know you wouldn't do that. Do we have time for one last item to read? Well, you'll have to make, I don't have time to make any comment on it, so I'll read this. We got time for that, and you'll have to figure if it has any pertinence. When the dents come in on the obvious, it ceases to be quite so obvious. Well, I got 30 seconds, I can't resist. In a sense, if you can follow this, to really give it a spin, all religion, all common sense is speaking about the obvious, such as don't steal. It's why you should go, well, hell, I knew that, for all reasons. But when the dents, that is, when people who don't know what they're talking about, talk about things that they should know what they're talking about, it kind of screws it up. That if the truth were XY7, if that was the great truth, if someone who doesn't understand it found that out, and they come out and say XY7, many people might go, ooh, and swoon, but it's not the same. When the dense, when the sluggish, when ordinary people comment on the obvious, no matter what the pretext is, when they comment on the obvious, they've already kind of spit on the wall. When they start trying to point out the point blank wall, and like, this might be, this could be, as soon as they point, it's like just their pointing of it has to some degree graffitiized it. It's already partially obscured it. Which, if you see that, is also one of the benefits. Because it keeps things going. Because if they point out a point blank wall and all of humanity went, well, I'll be down, we wouldn't be here. I would have been it. That's it.